Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Gen Politics. So, I've seen this chart go around the last couple days on the internet, and there's one key takeaway from this supposed Democrat support based on race and gender, and that is young white men are crazy far to the right. They just don't support the Democrats at all, especially even compared to people 80 and up, to their grandparents. They're the most conservative generation we have around today. And the left is wondering why has this happened? And they went from saying it didn't happen. You remember 10 years ago they were saying, no, that's not true. People are not going for the right. Everybody's maturing to the left. We're advancing as a civilization. And now they have people like they had to drag out Tim Walz to try and get the white male vote. They had to bring in Harry Sisson and all these like left-wing influencers to try and get young men. And none of it's working. It doesn't work because the problems is not an optics one when it comes to young men. It's a substantive problem, which really the left doesn't have an answer to when it comes to men. They appeal to every other group, as you can see by the chart. Women of color love the Democrats, and above 50% pretty consistently is the men, of color. Not that surprising. Women have gotten... It's kind of depends. You see things where they say they've gotten a lot more liberal and then some are pulling back and getting more conservative. I think as an average wise, I think women have gotten more liberal, but I think over time they're going to get more conservative again, kind of following the Gen Z men's lead over time. But that will be a longer process. I think the women right now are like far more liberal, especially college educated women. I think there's a big disparity in the numbers, which causes the average to look a little funky. But if you really broke it down by the numbers between like the real conservatives and the liberals of women between each age group, they're very diametrically opposed as well. And as we've seen with all political groups, they're getting, like all age groups, the political spectrum is widening vastly. The right, even alone, is probably more diverse right now than American politics in its entirety have been for the last 100 years. Same thing with the left, is that the spectrum of where you align on the political side, even on your own aisle, is so immensely huge that there's constantly like proxy war and infighting, even within the own parties, of like core substantive identity, not just, fighting over a policy or two, one that's good, one that's bad, like a whole like argument about identity, like where do we go as America, what does it mean to be American? Like that's kind of a big problem when you're having so much infighting in these parties. It's not a good sign for political stability. And when you have numbers like this with young men who are totally rejecting the left, and they want to go so far to the right that even the right doesn't know what to do with them, they're having the same problems the Democrats are, where they don't know why this is happening and they don't really know what to do about it. And there's argument as to whether even the people on the right need to somehow appeal to young men and what they need to do to get them back on their side and keep them from going further and further right. Because in reality, the main culprit behind this is like a lack of identity and purpose in life. Really. It's not taxes. It's not foreign wars. These are not the things that are driving men further right at its core. It's that most of them have no sense of identity, no community, no values, no goals, nothing, like no substance, or they didn't. Now they do. And a lot of them have found, as you can see with numbers of like baptisms have gone up. They're becoming very conservative, Christian, especially Catholic. That sort of thing is giving them an identity and a structure. And it's like the best water you've ever tasted is when you were dying of thirst, right? And any amount of core substance that these men receive is like a drop of water in the desert. It's amazing because it's the first time in their lives they've had any purpose, any substance. And what is, staunch Christian teaching telling you? It's very conservative at its core. Like it's very, very, far right at its core. If you read the early church fathers, like they're pretty intense about everything they talk about and preach. And, even like the founding fathers, they were very intense with their political beliefs and what they thought it meant to govern a society and whatnot. So when men dive into this rabbit hole of demanding structure, demanding a place in the world, and they read about their role models and idols, and they really read about them, not one paragraph in a textbook, like really read what they say and what they taught and how they lived, they're drawn to that immensely, and they go all in. They're all in. It's not like that's why you're not seeing a slow waning to the right or what, like it's a huge rubber band effect. That's why, is because it goes from my life is a total mess, total chaotic. I'm miserable and I have no idea why. And then you get a little bit of somebody on the right who says, follow Christ, work out, eat healthy, believe in your people, believe in an identity. Like you should seek wholesome relationships. You should do like these positive things. They just like snap over to the right, to that, that gets their attention, the people on the right who are saying those things, and then they go all in. And so I think I don't think there's a good answer to this on the left. I don't think they have anything, because it's not marketing, it's not optics, it really isn't policy so much as it is what is going on internally, like what is going on in their own life, like what has made me miserable, following the practices of the left, like rampant promiscuity, drug use, just letting everybody do whatever they want, total moral relativism. That's what the left preaches. That's what they want. They want everybody to be able to do their own thing. We're very inclusive. We're super nice. We just we love everybody for who they are and where they're at. And on the right, you have people saying, you're not good where you're at. Like, and even like the church fathers teaching, God loves you for the saint you can become. He loves you where you're at right now, but he doesn't love what you're doing while you're there, right? He doesn't love your sin. He doesn't look the other direction. He loves you because he loves what you can become. He loves when you're on a good day, right? Like what you're doing, what you can achieve, that you take care of other people, that you take care of yourself. He's not saying like, oh, you're great, you can do whatever you want, which is kind of the left's motto, which is just, you're great no matter what you do, no matter who you hurt, whatever you want to do, everything is fine as long as you're happy, as long as it's about you. And the right is saying it's not about you. And that it's not about you actually makes them feel more included. It makes them feel better, that it's like, oh, yeah, it's not about me. Like I can sacrifice, I can have a movement. They feel like they're part of a real movement because they have an important role in voting and whatnot in their society, but they still feel that, it's not all about me. It gives purpose and meaning to their life, is because when you're the god of your own life, it just gets boring. It's unfulfilling. You'll never experience anything outside of yourself. You'll never experience anything outside of anything that you consciously want. And that's not a very good way to live life. It's not very fulfilling. You don't experience very many things when you only experience things you want to. That taking on the voluntary suffering, the meeting with people, arguing, getting outside of your community and outside of your comfort zone, to fulfill something that is great, a great ambition. Like, don't sin ever. That's a really good ambition. That's a goal. That's something that you got to work for, and it's really, really hard. But the end goal, you see the fruits of the labor of the people who have done this before, the saints, right? Even if you're not Catholic, you can still admire like the saints as what they have done as people. And some of the stories are just amazing. And a selfish, self-absorbed person who only cares about their own whims, which is what the left preaches you should be able to do, it's not fulfilling, and it doesn't resonate with young people in that way. And there's no answer to that. It's not a gimmick. You can't just brush it aside, and you can't just cover it over anymore with the bread and circuses. Like, they're so at rock bottom, like young men specifically. They're overlooked in everything. They're not getting hired. They're not getting jobs. The college attendance is way down, marriage is way down, divorce is up like over 50%. And who wins in every divorce case? Women. They take, the children and the money and what, like men just feel like they're second class citizens in their own society, particularly the majority, which is white men, which is the majority of this country, feels pretty disenfranchised. And you can't get them on board with you if they feel disenfranchised. And, it's not always a zero-sum game, but they're treating it like it is, the left. Like they somehow can't lift up every group at the same time. They just have to focus on, who they feel is the most disparaged. And then white men, you're going to have to keep sacrificing for the groups we deem who are more important than you, more vulnerable than you, who we just blatantly say we care about more than you. That's not a winning ticket. It's not a winning strategy. And these things tend to compound as some move further right. In one friend group, you have somebody who's reading the early church fathers and whatnot, and sharing it with their friends, and that's kind of like getting pushed further right. I think inevitably things will go further right because I think they have the bearing of truth, because I myself, Christian, conservative, so I believe they have the bearing of truth. You kind of can see that played out of who's happier, who's living fulfilled lives. If you ask, people who are liberal, and you really sit down one-on-one and ask, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Most of the time they say no. Like most of the really liberal people I know are miserable. And it's not for like lack of trying. They're looking for something. They're just looking in the wrong place. And so when you're a bystander and you're seeing that the millennials, as you can see, the very liberal millennial men coming on the heels of that are incredibly miserable. I know a lot of millennial men. They're very miserable. They went all in on the left's idea of what fulfills you in life, and it didn't work. And so as a bystander, as a Gen Z, you look at that and you say, that didn't work. The logical extreme of the left didn't work. The people on the right, who I know, who are conservative and Christian, you say as a bystander, they're happier, they have families, they have fulfillment. I'm going to go all in on that. And so they're not just saying, I'm going to go in on the TV show version of Christianity and conservatism. They say, like the millennials went all in on the liberal agenda, I'm going to go all in on the conservative agenda. And it's working. And then they have that burden of proof. And it just pushes them even further right consistently. And every attempt to shame them and belittle them and tell them that their desire to find fulfillment and meaning is racist and sexist and awful, it just pushes them further away. And that the left has no answer to that, because their whole plan is in shaming men away and trying to remove their power to speak up for their community. Because the government wants central control, the left wants more, top-down control, and having, strong men, strong women too, but strong men as like community leaders, as fathers, who seek independence, who seek to kind of help their family first, their community, their identity, to not just be reduced to, individuals, and not to just go along with whatever the government says that they demand something to. It's something the left doesn't want. They don't want that. And so they're going to try really hard to keep men from getting that. And so I would say it's a fine line to walk between getting the male support, but then not giving them the power to resist your awful agenda. But the problem, it's not even a fine line. It's not possible. It's two diametrically opposed ideas. And that's why we've seen it hasn't played out well. Because even when the millennial men voluntarily took on that role of being super liberal, it didn't work. They're not happy. They're miserable. And that's why we're seeing this reaction today. And it's going to get worse with Gen Alpha, especially with all the new problems, the less socialization, the less morality, the more crime, the less national identity, all that sort of stuff. That's we're going to see it even more so throughout time. So that's my thoughts on this. I think it's interesting that this is happening, like that is so egregiously far to the right, and I think the women are going to follow too, because I think a lot of the men are going to say, I don't want a woman who does OnlyFans. I don't want a woman who does X, Y, or Z, who's very liberal, who all of these things. And I think a lot of women will see that and say, yeah, I don't know if I really want that either. Women are much more susceptible to kind of cultural influence that can be good and bad. And in this case, they went all in on the leftist stuff. They're very culturally entrenched, as you can see by like the women across the board are higher than the men across the board, even split by race. And yet, I think over time that is going to wane down, because I think they'll say that culturally, as the men gain more influence, the women will feel more secure to state their real points, the real objections to what other women are doing, the beliefs that they hold. They'll feel a lot safer about truly expressing their opinions without feeling ousted by a group. That's always like a dangerous thing for people, and I know for women, this societal pressures can be a lot higher, and so it's a lot harder for them to speak out than men, especially men who have no friends and family anyways, so they have nothing to lose. So we'll see that trend, I think, evolve more as time goes on, but I think it'll be very quick. I think it'll be rapid. Like every 10 years, you're going to see it get further and further to the right. And this is under like 20%, it looks like. So there's not that much ground left for the Democrats to lose. And as the boomers pass on, Gen X is already a lot more conservative themselves. So Gen X, Gen Z combined, millennials, they're still kind of liberal, but I think over time they'll get conservative, especially seeing that their all-in strategy on the left did not work, did not make them happy, did not make them fulfilled. If they can accept that and ask the question, what would make me fulfilled, and then start looking, I'm sure they would find that the right is a much better place to be. So that's my thoughts on this. I appreciate you watching. If you made it all the way through the video, like, subscribe, share, let me know what you think down in the comments below, and thank you for watching.